we need to do a big refactor. And it was tough.
Hello and welcome to SMB DevOps. My name is Jack, and joining me today is Aaron McDaniel. Aaron McDaniel is a industry veteran, has lots of experience in the AWS space. That happens to be the main cloud provider that I've been working with for the past decade. And he and I discussed today what business owners should do when it comes to a product or service that they're running, a software-based one, that is perhaps getting a little bit long in the tooth and desperately needs some under the hood upgrades to take place. I think the advice that Aaron provides is really solid and worth giving some consideration. So let's dive right on
I was
into
gonna say
it.
this is I got to put out there for the audience that this is my first real podcast, vlog, anything. So bear with me.
The reality is for a lot of businesses is that, dollars are tight. You got to focus on, number one is leads. Number two is sales. Number three is collecting the money. And then all the other stuff is what you need to do to support that. And at least from my perspective, like businesses don't want to overinvest in IT architecture. And also too, I've seen like companies where it's like they've been burned by, they hired a guy who knew stuff and he built something and turns out he didn't actually know stuff. And then a company then spends years unwinding that technical debt because most of the time you can't just stop the application. You can't really spend the 3 to 9 months refactoring things. And I think it's a challenging journey. It can be really frustrating. So maybe we can talk a little bit about, I think in the conversation with you, because I know you work with a lot broader set of customers. Like I'm focused on like, we're launching a service, right, within a business. And by and large, that's kind of my thing is like building a system, scaling a system, and then deciding how we're going to build the next one. And the quantity of services I focus on is much more limited, but they have like weird requirements that don't always fit. Like a lot of my stuff is in the voice VoIP side of things. And so launching those type of services are like, like Kubernetes just doesn't really work that great for that type of thing. And so it's like stuff that's talked about really commonly. It's like, yeah, that I would love to do that because I love that like deployment model of just, having some YAML files, you run some containers and it just works. Works amazing for web servers, but just for VoIP stuff where you need those UDP ports exposed doesn't work. I had a question here, which was, what's an interesting story that you've seen in your realm of consulting? And for the sake of the innocent, we'll ignore names here and replace them with like Acme Inc. or something like that. But maybe what's an interesting story about Acme Inc. where they had some problems and how did they work their way out of that?
Well, so it's interesting. This touches back when you're talking about that story of that IT person or that solutions architect who could maybe conceptualize something but not necessarily implement it. I really cut my teeth in that. I mean, I came out of college into the first .com, and that was really every single startup out there. I mean, yes, there were and are some luminary developers in that era. I mean, you look back to the age of computer science that kind of came about 60s, 70s, 80s, but that's not who the startups were hiring, right? They weren't hiring these folks that could write in C or C++. They were hiring folks like myself that, had an inkling of technology, and probably cost half the price, right? So there's a whole thing where you see those big monolithic nightmare spaghetti code messes. And so it's not just even Acme Inc. It's Inks. It's all of the Acmes that I've run into and they've been worked for. Those problems are difficult. It is the chicken before the egg problem. Like, we need to drive revenue. We need to get the marketing out. We need to get this brand built. Oh yeah, hey, I guess we need some servers, and I know someone, so-and-so's brother-in-law, sister-in-law, whatever. And next thing you know, fast forward to your point, two years later, you've got this nightmare concoction that is limping along. And you have to look at your resources and say, yeah, do we keep this going? How can we scale it? Do we do some sort of a parallel development, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know if there's any one exact story. I do know there's a startup I worked at that I absolutely loved it. And We were facing that. I mean, frankly, I had already worked as a consultant. I'd already worked as a developer. By that point, I'd been a sales engineer and had gotten a promotion and gotten a new job there as a director of product management. And that was one of the things that, as one of the first systems and sales engineers around one of these products they'd acquired, and then later the director of product management around, I had watched for years this kind of yarn ball growing, right? Because it was driven by customer demands. I mean, frankly, if a customer showed up, here's X $100,000, will you do this? We said yes. We needed revenue. We needed to build our headcount. The product became this amalgamation of different customer needs, different technology stacks, different eras of technology, you know. And we had this really interesting set of individuals that we kind of had to keep around for care and feeding. And that actually sounds bad. I mean, these are great people. It wasn't even keeping around. What we weren't doing is optimizing their talent. And so that's really what I kind of bring into it is any company X, Acme Inc., when they have made those decisions that are so common and continue to happen, interestingly enough, right? It's history repeating itself over and over again. There is that inflection point where they say, okay, what do we do? Where do we go? Because we can either keep burning whatever our headcount costs, sometimes even bringing in consultants at, a higher rate, kind of like, hey, let's turbocharge this. Let's see if we can just get this out of the way, nip it in the bud. Or you have to do a reset, et cetera, refactoring, et cetera. So I made the really hard decision at that point as a leader in that particular little organization that we need to do a big refactor. And it was tough. I mean, maybe we were lucky. Maybe we had enough confidence from our existing customers. We did have confidence in the markets we were trying to get to and the maturity we were trying to get to. We did see that confidence, or we had that confidence in where we wanted to go. And we had to have a lot of really hard conversations externally with our customer base and say, look, you all have experienced some of this pain. Look at the trouble tickets you've submitted. Look at the product feature requests you've submitted. Look at how long sometimes this is taking for us to get to what should be a simple request. I think I was able to build that understanding, if not trust, with that customer base. And then, of course, internally. It's really difficult in a small startup where you're looking at velocity. We were looking for that hockey stick curve of growth and revenue. We had investors in different phases that were coming back saying, hey, where's the money? That was difficult. That was probably more difficult, really, was to set the stage and win the buy-in internally for this refactoring project that was really almost like a new product launch. It was so close to being a refactor / new product that it was just like, look, this is going to take us 12 to 18 months. And during that time, we're going to have to slow down patch releases, slow down any other features in, let's call it the prior version. I don't remember which version it was. Let's call it the 3.0 or the 2.0, right? We went to a 4.0. That was the big new product. And it was, by and large, minus some of the more modern stuff we'd done, some service-based stuff we built at the time, by and large, it was brand new. But it was 12 to 18 months. And it was close to 18 months of literally putting a lot of marketing, a lot of releases, critical bugs, of course, we had to address, but we had to continually be disciplined about that pause on the old version to make sure that we put the resources, these talented people, optimize their skill set, optimize what they cost to get this newer product done. And it was an ongoing challenge. So I came out of that, I think, with some good perspective. And I think that's what even got us talking about being here today was, here's this one example. At the same time, I've used that example in shorter versions with my customers, with my compatriots, my fellow technology professionals, et cetera. It's sort of, you're not alone. Here's an example. And this was hard. At the same time, it was the right decision. I was able to get the stars to align, to get buy-in, and or at least some permission, I suppose, if you want to call it that, or it was reluctant. Believe me, it was very reluctant permission to get that done. Um, but it's also easy to tell the story, right? You can go into especially a small and medium business, right, which is I think a lot of your audience, to say, look, we're balancing so many factors here. We are really trying to build a brand. We're trying to build this velocity, right? And that's the key of small and medium business. It's about velocity, getting out there, getting to become more well known, expanding that circle, expanding your network, expanding the customer base, right? Because then word of mouth is really important. You limited resources. Do I spend this much money on advertising? Do I do an event? Do I go to a conference?
Right.
Or and then frankly, and we're going to go talk to some venture folks or some investors, and here's the pitch. And I can tell you that the pitch of, we built this MVP. Here it is. It's pretty cool, right? It does some neat stuff. We have this really cool idea and we're getting some traction. What we'd really like is a lot of money to spend about 2 to 3 years making this really awesome. And if we were talking about being in the cloud, let's use AWS's principles, a well-architected framework. Like, let's make it aligned to all these pillars, and let's make it HA and DR and all the acronyms. No one is going to say, "Oh, cool, here's like $1 billion. Call us in 3 years when this really perfect, awesome solution is out there."
No, I mean, you don't have that freedom. Like
Right.
that's a bad tell for the investor.
Yeah, so it's just not even exist. It doesn't exist, right? So I always kind of like to
Yeah,
take that
that's not practical.
back. Yeah, you gotta go. This is this extreme. The other extreme is what I've also seen a lot of, frankly, is the vaporware problem. Here's what it will be. Here's what we're thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I think the key is finding the realistic balance point. But if you are in that boat of saying, look, I've got this really cool idea. We've built this MVP. We're taking it out. We're building it out. Can I set aside some amount of resource, time, it may even just be time, frankly. We're always under the crunch. We got to get this launched. We got another version coming. We got a patch, do. And especially if you're into some sort of a CI/CD workflow, it's like you may even kind of lose track at a certain level of what is actually going into the product, right? Certainly there's areas you should trust your folks and say, look, I hired professionals. They know what they're doing. I don't need to look at everything that's being released. But even that, can I build a pipeline? Do I even have the time to build a pipeline? So I think my biggest advice to people is to say, look, set aside an hour a week or a half hour. Find some unit of time to start, and time is money, to step back and go, okay, I know we're in this rush. We need to get this done. But where am I going to be in 3 months, 6 months, and 9 months from now? If I follow this route, if I continue to be heads down, if it's whack-a-mole all day long.